Hello and welcome to the next episode of Eat, Move, Win and the Musings of Bullshit Queenager. I am joined today with best-selling author with a little bit of a twist that we'll get to, the lovely Claire Duffy. Welcome to the gang, Claire. How are you?
Thanks so much. It's lovely to be here. I'm doing very well.
Good. So we're going to get into it today, and I am really quite excited about this subject and talking to you because Claire is a best-selling author, as I said, but she writes very sexually. So shall we say, I'm not going to go straight in with the pure smut and filth, but very sex positive and female sex positive. And I think that's a huge topic. But I think, first of all, Claire, give us a little bit of an intro about you. How did you get into being an author? And we'll take it from there.
Right. Okay. So it's a little bit of a roundabout route, because I actually started out wanting to be a screenwriter. I wanted to write for telly. Like, that was always like my big dream. I went to film school and I did a little bit of directing, and I kind of did that for most of my 20s, and I was that way that I did get some projects away. I always describe it as you get into this, like the landing pattern, where you're kind of like going around Heathrow. You can see the airport, but you're not quite getting like a big project away on the telly. So you're sort of like, you're in it, but you're not. So I was doing that for about 10 years, and it was driving me nuts, because one of the things I think about being a screenwriter who's not like fully made it yet is you say to people, oh, I'm a writer, and they go, oh, anything I can watch, and you're like, no, actually. And so it just feels like you're not really doing anything. I always think it's a bit like if you're an architect and all you ever did was do blueprints for houses that never get built. It just feels like you're not doing anything. So after a few years, so I was living in London because I'd gone to drama school down there. I was living in London, and I was just so fed up with life. I remember I was living with my sister, and then she moved out in with her now husband. And I just remember kind of going, is this it? Like, I'm working a crap temp job and I'm not really getting anywhere in my career, and I'm not really wanting to kind of settle down and get engaged, but like everyone I knew was doing that. So I bought myself a one-way ticket to Stockholm. I was reading The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, and I'd always had a thing about ABBA, and I just thought, what's the worst that could happen? Like, I'll go for a mad 6 months and it'll be a little adventure. Like, I'd already lived abroad. I lived in Vancouver for a while, went to film school there. So I kind of had a bit of a background in it. So yeah, I'll never forget, my mum took me to the airport, and as I was like getting on the plane, she was like, I didn't think you were serious. And I was like, no, I'm off. So off I went to Stockholm, didn't know a soul, didn't know a word of Swedish, didn't know like anything other than like literally ABBA. And after a couple of years, like, I started to get into, again, the film industry, and the same thing kind of happened. Like, I'd get really close with one project or another, a producer would love me, and then it would just kind of fall apart. It was like a house of cards. So after a while, I basically just threw a tantrum. I was like, I cannot do this to myself anymore. I'm seeing all these male screenwriters who, were writing the same kind of stuff as me, going on to have series on the telly, having movies get made, and it was just not happening for me for whatever reason. So I decided I'm not going to do this to myself anymore. One of my best friends in Stockholm ran a daycare. There's like, I don't know if you know, but like there, every single kid basically starts daycare at 12 months because it's all subsidized by the government, everything. So there's millions of them. So my friend said, look, you're really good with my daughter. Do you want to come and like be a substitute teacher for like a week or two? And I thought, do you know what? I can either sit here in a like just pile of bitterness and like hating the film industry, hating male screenwriters that are more successful than me, or I can go and sing the wheels in the bus in Swedish for like a couple of weeks. So I went and did that, and I ended up working there for a year. And I lasted without writing for about 3 weeks. And then I had this mad idea to write a blog as one of the characters in one of the screenplays I'd had that was almost going to get made, then it fell apart. And it was about this American woman who moves to Stockholm to be with her Swedish boyfriend. Like, she's just met him, like a big, really intense holiday romance. She moves over and then realizes that actually she doesn't know him that well. And then all of a sudden, one of his best friends gets murdered, and the police are clearly like circling him. So she's all a bit like, am I supporting him and trying to clear his name, or actually, I don't know this guy, am I living with a murderer? So I started writing this blog, and I did it basically, my class was the 1-year-olds. So they had a 2-hour nap at lunchtime. So I would sit and like right away about this murder mystery for months and months, and it kind of took off, and it was like kind of the golden age of blogging, and so took off a little bit, but nobody knew that it wasn't real, which I hadn't intended to do. It had just never really occurred to me anyone would think it was real, so I just wrote as her. And then people started commenting like, are you okay? I'm also an American in Stockholm, I can meet you, I can, and I'd be like, oh no. Like, and I kind of had to come to terms with the fact that like writers are not very nice people, because when I eventually came clean and told them, look, I'm a writer, this person doesn't exist, some people were like really, really upset. And I was like, oh, like, I feel terrible, because I actually had this email, quite an emotional email from a woman being like, I thought this woman was going through the same stuff as me, and I thought that like we really connected. I thought she was my friend. And I was like, I mean, I feel terrible you're upset, but oh my God, I created this character that meant this much to you. I was a little tiny bit thrilled, because the reason that I came clean was that the first murder had just happened in the blog, and a bunch of people had been like phoning Swedish newspapers being like, or emailing in being like, why aren't you reporting on this? And I was like, okay, it's time. Anyway, that's a little bit of a long story, but when I finally got to the end of that story, one of the other readers emailed and said, could you put this in a file so I can read it all on my Kindle? Because I've been doing like a chapter a day for like 6 months. She was like, I want to read it all again from the beginning. And I literally Googled put book on Kindle, discovered self-publishing as a thing, which I had never heard of at the time, published it, put it up on Amazon, and it was a bestseller. And it was like, that's what I've done ever since. So
wow, that is amazing. So how do you get from doom and gloom of Scandinavian murder to writing feminist sex positive filth?
Well,
that is a bit of a jump. Like, I have read some Scandinavian murder mysteries.
They are dark, although it's a little bit relevant, because I would say that living in Sweden, I mean, I think I was always, you know, I've always been a feminist. I've always been quite sex positive. I think I was quite lucky in some ways to be sort of a very like youngest Gen X. And so I feel as though kind of we grew up in this era of, that sounds weird, like I'm like elder millennial, get lost. We are young Gen X's. Thank you so much. And I feel like we kind of grew up in this era of, like the ladette and girl power and all this kind of thing. So it was like this little sliver of time where it was a positive thing to be sex positive and to like, maybe I'll get married, maybe I won't, like men are a pain in the arse, but I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And it kind of feels like that's run back maybe a little bit for some younger generations. So or perhaps I should say, I always thought I was sex positive until I moved to Sweden. And then I was like, oh my goodness, we don't know the half of it. And it's just this. And of course, it's not to say that there isn't like any sexism at all. You know, they're still human, but their openness, their attitudes, like one of my favorite stories that I actually got told variations of this 100 times, so I had this friend, he did a year of high school in the States, did that kind of exchange thing. And while he was there, he ended up getting into an argument with some, you're picturing the cool, football player guy. They're arguing away. And at one point, this guy pulls out the whole, I said that last night when I fucked your mother thing. And my friend went, oh, do you know my mother? Have you been to Sweden? Because in his mind, he's like, why are you suddenly confessing an affair with my mum? I thought we were having a fight, because they don't see that as an insult. It completely like baffles them that anyone would consider that. And actually, when you think about it, and I've just naturally said, I hope it's okay, I'm swearing, by the way, I'm assuming.
Yeah, it's fine.
Because I'm like, because you do say like motherfucker, and then you're like, hold on a minute, actually, why? That's only an insult if you inherently think that having sex is an insult. And they don't. They're like, go mum, get some, fantastic. And it's like a national in-joke in some ways that we find that some kind of like weird insult. So I would say that a few years in Sweden definitely like shaped or
opened your mind,
attitudes, opened my mind in a very enjoyable kind of way, definitely. But I did continue writing crime, like when I started, because obviously my first book had been about this murder. It was about a relationship. I would say I've always written kind of romantic suspense, I suppose, because to me the two go together quite well. But nothing filthy at that point. It was all, you know, off screen, as it were. And then my first series that I wrote when I moved back to Glasgow, that was very straight up crime. So I was kind of writing that and I was enjoying it, and it was great. It was fantastic. It was going really well. And then it was actually the beginning of the first lockdown, or the first winter of lockdown, that I just,
Yeah.
it was so dark. It was so bleak. You know, you were locked in your house indefinitely, and there just didn't seem to be anything to look forward to. And it was just, and I had like the next crime book that I was due to write, and I couldn't do it. I was like, it just brought me down, thinking about murder, thinking about, you know, betrayal and grief. And I was like, I've got too much of that, you know, in reality right now. You know, the world was so scary. And so I picked up a Jackie Collins, and I thought, I'm going to
I love Jackie Collins.
I love Jackie Collins. Honestly, Queen Jackie, man. I think I have read every single thing she has written over the years. So I picked up, I think
the one that I love, Lady Boss, Lucky Fantiago, is that her name?
Lucky, she is fantastic. That entire series, I could just like, yeah, gobble it.
The original boss bitch, that's what she was.
Yes, exactly. And she's so like, she's so real about it, and so sex positive as well. Like when you think about the era that she was writing in, there's never any sense of like there's anything wrong with them for having sex. Like they just do it because it's something fun that you do with somebody you fancy and love, maybe, but you don't have to. And so I think maybe I grew up, so my grandma actually worked for HarperCollins in Bishopbriggs, and she used to bring home these boxes of like books, these, you know, Mills and Boon and Jackie Collins and all these kind of things. And I obviously was not allowed to read them, but I did anyway. So I did kind of grow up on a diet of, you know, Jackie Collins, Shirley Conran, you know, Lace, which is like amazing. Oh, there's another one. What's her name? It's completely flown out my head. Like The Group is fantastic. And I feel like that era of I mean, they call it more like romantic women's fiction than straight up romance, is kind of what I certainly hope that I write. It's what I inspire. I keep trying to get the Jackie Collins of Shawlands going. I keep saying it to people, and I'm like, at some point
I am going to, when I get this published, it will be published as the Jackie Collins of Shawlands.
I love it. That is like that. I could die happy at that point. When I'm the Jackie Collins of Shawlands, that's it. So as I say, I read Jackie Collins, and I found it so joyful, and just so, and thinking about people, you know, being ambitious, and yeah, there's still betrayals and backstabbings because that's fun, but it's glitzy, and it's like emotions, and it's falling in love. And I thought, I want to write that. I'm going to write that. So then I started reading a bunch of more like contemporary, sort of like modern romances, thinking, I want to read, if I'm going to start writing in it, I need to read and see like what's out there now. And romance is a huge genre, and it covers everything from like really, really, you know, like dark, hardcore kink to wholesome, clean romances and everything in between. So I don't want to tar it all with one brush at all, but I read a lot, and I kept on just finding so much patriarchy in it. Like it was always, you know, this woman, she was always a bit quirky, and she was like feisty and independent until she met the guy, and then he protected her. And, you know, are these guys who were like possessive, you'd sometimes be like in the guy's mind and have him like see her for the first time, and he's like, I don't even need to know her surname because it's going to be mine in any second. And I'm like, get lost, you arrogant dick. Like, it's just I get that, you know, that can be attractive like to a point, but for the most part, I want to nut guys like that in real life, and I don't find them sexy on books either. And so I was like, okay, I want to write something about the like dorky, shy guys that I fancy that are like dead sexy in their own way. And so I kind of set out on this like feminist romance journey. And then the more sex in these books I read as well, it's either this, like she's a virgin, like, you know, in her 30s, which again, in real life, nothing wrong with whatsoever if that's how your life is going. But when it is presented as she's been waiting for the guy to, I'm like, oh, get lost. And then the first time they do it, and she's like multi-orgasmic all over the place. It's like, oh, come on. And
I know you never see a true lose your virginity story, do you? It's just like fumbling in the dark, going, it's a bit sore.
oh, exactly. Or, oh, is that how it's meant to? Is it, right? Okay. Or the guy who's just like, I used to always say like, or what I kind of like try and write, I'm like, women are like manual cars, and there are so many men who will put you on and try and go right into fourth gear, and I'm like, we will just stall. That's not how we work. Whereas so many of these scenes, they dive into fourth gear, and I'm there sitting there going, ouch.
Yeah, like not quite ready for that yet.
Oh, exactly. And like, why are women writing that, like almost pretending like it would be good? And of course I do get that it's fantasy to a point, but it just seems so it was so kind of like one note that I was like, none of these are sex scenes that I'm going, oh, I want to imagine the time I'm sitting there going, oh, I hope she's okay. So it really became a bit of a mission for me to write feminist filth, and to really like spend time and really sort of, I guess, focus on the female pleasure and like what it is that I think women actually enjoy. And it's not just, I'm now, all of my friends like run when they see me coming, because I'm like, so how did it go on that date last night? Did you do this? Did you do that?
Because I was gonna ask you, like, what kind of research did you have to do? Like, did you do it all yourself? Did you go to like sex clubs? Did you interrogate all your pals? Like, what did you have to do to get them?
A little bit of all of the above, I guess. Yeah, I mean, I've been single for 10 years, so that's been a bit of I've lived the research in in a lot of ways. But yeah, I do. So I write at the moment. So I've been kind of building it. I've just actually launched my first like sort of major series of novels in this Jackie Collins of Shawlands type genre. But I've been building up to it by doing, I call it Friday Filth, because I do my newsletter every Friday, and I do a little like steamy short story that I'm like, again, it's all about female pleasure, because I started noticing that again, so many of these books I'm reading, they spend an awful lot of energy on writing about blowjobs. And I'm always a little bit like, is this not supposed to be female fantasy? Now, don't get me wrong, in real life, as part of the give and take of an actual sex, absolutely, again, do whatever you like. But the idea that this is supposed to be the like ultimate of female fantasy, female pleasure, and like, I'm sorry, but like, would you do it if it wasn't for him? Like, would you? Is there any like physical pleasure for a woman? And like, and again, there's nothing wrong with doing it for him in reality, in a longer term relationship, if you're writing about that. But I actually wrote. Sorry, I'm jumping around so much because I keep on being like, I have to talk about the blowjob thing. So I'm in loads of Facebook groups with other like authors and other romance authors. And I had to ask at one point, because I kept reading it again and again and again. I was like, why are we advertising this genre as like, for women, by women, about women? And I keep having to read about male pleasure, like what's going on. So I asked them the question, and some of their answers, like it was all around the idea of, but I get so much pleasure from seeing him get pleasure, or I feel powerful seeing him, quivering wreck or whatever. And again, in reality, as part of the like full, party of pleasure, absolutely. But the idea that the like women's wildest fantasies are about giving men pleasure, I just found it so completely bleak. So after that conversation, I made it like my mission that these Friday Filths, they're like, occasionally I let the guy have a shot, very occasionally, but it's all about women. But then, because I do it like every single week, and it's like different couples and different situations, I started thinking, I'm running out of positions. I'm running. I'm like, if I have them do it upside down, does that count as something new? I'm like, it's like origami, trying to come up with something different. So yeah, I started quizzing my friends. I've got one friend, she's glorious. She won't mind me mentioning that she basically texts me after every date. She's like, this is what we did. She lives in Stockholm, and the last time we spoke, she was flying up to the Arctic Circle because this guy had rented them a sauna for the night. And I was like, okay, that's going in.
That's going in there. Yep.
So yeah, so I do pick up more from, my friends are getting a little bit like, if they start telling me about a date, they're like, Claire, this isn't going in. I'm like, no, it's fine. unless you have permission, they don't go in.
Oh, so you mentioned like you've been single for 10 years, so you have a lot quite of, experiences to draw on from a personal point of view. Do you let your dates, if you're going on dates, do you let them know in advance what you do?
I have done, well, yeah, I do. So I usually do it because I'm just a bit like, well, it's who I am, it's what I do. I'm not gonna lie about it. I have come to realize that it maybe sometimes gives guys the wrong idea. I actually, just a couple of weeks ago, I was buying something. I won't say what, because it gives away who this poor guy is. And he was serving me, and as we were talking, he was like, "Oh, what'd you do?" And I was like, "Oh, I write filth." And he then slid into my DMs and asked me out, and bless him, he's a sweet wee thing. But he was all like, "Oh, when I heard what you write, I got very distracted," and I was a bit like, "Oh, sweet boy, that is
Sweet
fiction."
boy, that's
So I've maybe learned my lesson. I might need to edit a little bit when I meet some guys, but I do, like, I would never use an experience without permission unless I kind of like changed it enough. Like, I would never be like, if this is your move, then that's fine. You can copyright your move. That's okay.
Oh, that is absolutely hilarious. So, like, do you come up against challenge of, like you mentioned, you're in groups with all these other female sex positive authors? Do you ever come across still, that whole, well, you shouldn't be writing about that stuff, it's a man's world, all that kind of, or is it, would you say it's more of like society's more open to what you're doing?
I think actually it's probably more open than it used to be. I think if anything, I do need to be a little bit careful because, as I say, I do have strong opinions about the way that some romance is written and some sex is written. But I also don't want to be sitting there going, "Oh, all the rest of it is rubbish and I'm doing something different," because sexual tastes and whatever floats your boat it's so unique and so individual. So I always want to be really careful that I'm not sort of like criticizing other romance authors because they're writing what floats their boat, and that's absolutely fine. So I think probably I actually feel as though I get more not backlash exactly, but more kind of like arguments sometimes when I talk about like the tropes that drive me nuts. Because I do a TikTok about kind of about general feminist issues and dating, and then I talk about my books as part of that. And every once in a while, I will talk about like romance books and some of the issues that I have where I do feel like this possessive alpha guys. I'm like, why are we romanticizing that? Or, like grumpy sunshine, that's like a whole trope that's like a really, really popular genre that people buy. And I'm like, who doesn't know those couples where she's like the loveliest person on earth and he's just this grouchy lump? And
oh my God, that's my marriage.
I mean, there's different versions of grumpy, I know, and some of them they can genuinely be really good guys, but it just seems like such a strange thing to go out of your way to like romanticize, particularly when they mean grumpy, they're talking about your, growling in a corner or, or horrible to every other woman except for her. Like, that's such a thing that I'm like, yeah, when I was 12, I maybe wanted a boy to like hate all women except for me. But it's such I mean, I think calling it internalized misogyny is maybe taking it a little bit too far, but it is on that, it's got that energy, to kind of be romanticizing the idea that, you're the one and only and every other woman has to be horrible for you to feel that you're important. So I would say probably for the most part, that's the more, I say backlash is a strong word, but that's where I feel I get a little bit more kind of conflict. But I think mostly, maybe if I was a bit younger, I think I would be a little bit more like, "Oh yes, no, I do this," but I tend to just be like, "This is what I write. If you've got an issue with it,
Don't read it."
Exactly.
Just don't read it.
Not telling to write it. I have got a few friends who are like, "I do open your newsletter, but I'm really sorry, I don't read the filth. I'm not," and I'm like, that is absolutely fine. It's not for everybody, and that's, I've got no issue with that at all.
I am totally enrolling in your newsletter. We're gonna have to we'll have to put a link in the show notes as well, so people can sign up to your newsletter too. So let's talk a little bit about the younger generation then. So we're both obviously in our 40s. We went through a culture of kind of feminine uprising, but also at the same time, it actually, when you look back, it actually wasn't. And like me and my husband were talking about this the other day about like things like Nuts magazine and Loaded and all that, and there was an element of empowerment, but actually now that I think back, I'm kind of like, was that just a whole generation of girls getting really shit-faced and then, you know, essentially not being able to give consent and all that kind of stuff and taken advantage of? So you're obviously, if you've got TikTok and you're talking to younger people, what is it like? You know, is there a generational gap there? Are younger kids approaching sex and sexual relationships in a different way than what we did? You know, where's the differences, do you think?
That really interesting, because in some ways I feel as though there's the two big differences and they're the exact opposite, because I would agree that our generation, I feel as though we got as far as women can behave like men and that's okay, but still it was only we're behaving like men. We weren't being women who are independent and drinking and having sex if we want or whatever. It was literally ladette, which when you think about it, it's like, no, I'm a woman enjoying that kind of thing. And of course, at the same time, we also had Bridget Jones, and that he's just not that into you. And even Sex and the City, it was positive in a lot of ways. Again, of course, you watch it now and there's various issues that you wouldn't maybe approach in the same way today. But for us, it was a kind of, a way of saying, oh, actually, you can be single in your 30s and that can be a really good thing. So I feel as though we were at a sort of like pivotal time where, we were maybe one of the first generations to be told, what do you want to be when you grow up, to little girls. Like our mums, for the most part, it was mostly assumed that they were going to be wives and mums. Whereas we kind of had that we were going to do something different. But then it's almost like, I feel as though the men of our generation weren't told, oh, by the way, you're going to have to do half the housework and half the. So we were in this kind of like in-betweeny thing where I do think, and I see this a lot on TikTok, because as I said, do talk about a lot of these issues, and then I get women commenting and talking about their lives. And I feel as though, we are in this kind of middle thing where a lot of women our age have had careers, they've been independently, financially independent, but they have also done 90+% of the housework, of the child rearing, of the, so they're a little bit like, maybe this wasn't the best, like this isn't working for us. This isn't actually liberation. So I do think there's been a kind of something of a backlash. I do see a worrying amount of there's a bit of a trad wife trend that I see going around on TikTok. And it is these young women who are like, I have seen my mum work all her life and also look after us and also cook every night. And also, if I'm going to choose between those, I'm going to just stay home and cook, and I'm going to bake, and I'm going to, do all this weird, like idealized version of the 50s housewives, which didn't ever really exist. Or if it did, it was very wealthy people. And it was only a very, very brief time period of history. So I do find a little bit of a backlash. And then also hookup culture. So I have a lot of opinions about hookup culture. I feel like for our generation, we were like pre-internet porn. There was still a bit of innocence around that. Like it was just a good old fashioned one night stand. Whereas I feel like now it's been turned into this thing of hookup culture. It seems to come with a like side order of actively being a dick. And I'm like, no, you can be nice, you can be polite, and I'm still not going to want to be your girlfriend. Like, don't panic. It's not, I do feel like a lot of younger men, because, and just with the reality of being single in your 40s, I date a lot of younger men and I usually regret it, because an awful lot of them seem to have grown up with this idea that the only woman that you're nice to is your girlfriend or your wife. And I'm like, do you realize you won't get a girlfriend or a wife unless you learn to be nice on a first date or on a one night stand or whatever? So because this situation it's gone to such an extreme, I see a lot of very young women saying, I am piecing out of hookup culture. I'm saving myself for relationships. And And it's this weird thing where I understand why, if casual sex is for them with this, they're actively going out their way to be a dick and to leave while you're still catching your breath kind of thing. And you know, texting. I heard of somebody with a guy more or less rolled over, opened up Tinder and started setting up his next shag. Like, it was like, you don't have to be, you can wait half an hour before you're moving on without that being a commitment. So I do understand why a lot of them feel the need to opt out of hookup culture. But the problem is that it's as if the other side of the coin is then purity culture, that they're like, I'm saving myself for, you know, like a man who's proven that he really loves me, or he has to take me out on dates and he has to pay for me and he has to, and I'm like, that's not feminism. That's, I mean, I suppose it's not feminism necessarily, but I feel as though there's this huge happy medium where you can have respect for yourself and you can have standards and you can not put up with men's nonsense, but also know that casual sex inherently isn't the problem. Or you can want to have a career and know that your career isn't the problem if you are also doing, you know, 95% of the housework. Your problem is your lack of adult male partner then.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I do think it feels as though everything has just got more extreme for women in their 20s, maybe early 30s now, whereas I feel as though we had a bit of a kind of messier, I kind of hate to use the term.
Drunken time, really?
Oh yeah, exactly. Like, we didn't have all these terms. It was just, you know, you like the talking stage versus the whatever. And it's like, I don't know. I was just shagging him then. And yeah, eventually he'd be my boyfriend, but we didn't have to be like, are we officially in the talking stage?
No, that was the thing that always used to get me about American TV shows. And you're like, we're dating. And then you've got to have a serious conversation about, well, are we boyfriend and girlfriend now? You're like, oh.
Well, exactly. We all just kind of fell into it. It's like, are we exclusive now? And I'm like, if you're even thinking about another woman once you've seen me a couple of times, then we don't have to have a conversation. You've blown it.
Oh dear, it's wild, absolutely wild. It's terrifying as well. I've got a wee boy who's 11, and we're going to have to start having the conversation about things like pornography. And I had heard, I can't even remember where I'd read this, and it was something about they'd done a survey of 15-year-old boys, and it was like 9 out of 10 of them believed that women didn't have pubes because they had seen most of their sexual education had come through pornography, like on internet and what, and all, like, women are obviously all shaved or waxed or lasered. And I was like, oh my God, I have to make sure, like, and that's always stuck with me. That was when he was a baby. I learned that. I was like, oh my God, so I have to actually have conversations about, you know, real life sex and real life relationships. And he is going to be presented with a lot of filth porn online. And maybe it's worthwhile giving him a book when he's older.
Maybe not quite yet, but yeah, no, I have
older. Like, but yeah, and I think it's hugely positive to have female-led pornography, filth, because it's, you know, it's real life. Sex is real life.
Absolutely.
It's not all this like, oh, turn off the lights and take off my nightie and just go at it for 2.5 minutes and then you're done. So yeah, exactly. Have to keep it real.
Here's my earbuds gone. Hold on a sec. Yeah, and I think as well, even like the filth that was been written in the 70s, the ones that I mentioned earlier, the Shirley Conrans and the Jackie Collins, an awful lot of that sex was so much more realistic, much like the porn of that period, where you know, you did have women with bodies as they are. You know, yes, they were Hollywood bodies, so maybe not all the lumps and bumps that the rest of us have, but not this, you know, extreme sort of unreality. So yeah, no, I think it's hugely important, and I think an awful lot of it does come down to how boys are raised. That, because actually, funnily enough, so I was talking about Sweden earlier, there is like a thing, there's like a famous thing that men of our age exactly are spectacular in bed. I would say maybe late 30s to late 40s, early 50s. Everyone is like, if you have not had a Swedish man of that age, like you have not lived. And like, you know, like when you move there, you're like he's got there's a full routine happening. This manual car thing that I was talking about, he works you through every single gear on the way up, and it's like spectacular. It's amazing. And I ended up asking, I ended up going out with this guy, Matthias, and I was like, I need to know where you learned this. Like, I need to, like, what is this that pretty much every nationality of man has? Because this is even in one night stands, like this is just their idea. And he said, oh, it was my mum. And I'm like, I beg your pardon? And basically these incredible, Swedish feminists of the 70s sat all their boys down in the 80s, the 90s, and were like, okay, if you are going to grow up and you're going to date women, this is how you're going to treat them. And this is what you need to know about how they actually work. And it's like this, it's a phenomenon, and it's an absolutely wonderful phenomenon. And every time I say this to like a friend who's got a young son, her eyes go like, I'm not going to tell him. So maybe there's a subtler way, maybe there's a more like Scottish way of doing it. But yeah, I think that's why things are different in Sweden, because people just talk openly about this stuff, and it's not this like, you can't tell children. It's like it's a part of life. And I'm not saying you should go out of your way to talk about pornography, like obviously not. There is an appropriate age where they're mature enough to understand and everything. But when you take I think when you approach sex from a morally neutral perspective, it doesn't make you good, it doesn't make you bad. It's just a lovely thing to do with somebody you fancy, with somebody you love. It's a human need. It's it's a part of life, and nothing more than that. If you don't personally feel comfortable doing it the first time you meet somebody, absolutely fine. Just like you might be the type of person who opens up to a new friend the first time you meet them, or you might hold back until you know them better. I think it should be exactly the same. So it's not at all about saying that everybody should be leaping into bed with the first person, after 10 minutes. You should do whatever makes you feel comfortable. But this idea that you are a good person or a bad person because of a lovely thing that your body was designed to do is just so absurd to me. And I think that if there's any way of getting that across to everyone, really, I think people of our generation need to learn it as well. Then yeah, I think we've done something good.
Oh, I love it. That is a perfect way to end. Raise the children to have enjoyable sex when they want and when it's safe.
Give enjoyable sex as well. Like that should be it should be a point of pride. And that's what it is. Like I said, with these Swedish guys, it's like a point of pride. Like if a woman hasn't enjoyed herself, he is like, then I am not finished. Then I have not done. Whereas guys, I once had a wee guy here in Glasgow. I won't name him, obviously, but he looked me in the eye and he said, oh, women don't actually really have orgasms from sex. They just, they have to sort themselves out with a vibrator later. And I was like, oh, my darling boy, you have things to learn.
Oh, bless.
Exactly. And
anyway, I'm not going to go into my sex tales. I have some that we could really laugh about, but today's probably
maybe
not
just follow up then.
Okay, so lovely Claire, where can people find you? Because I've got a sneaky suspicion you're going to have a bit of an uplift in your email subscribers and maybe a few new subscribers on your TikTok channel. So where can people find you? What's the best way?
So my publishing company is called Fika Books, which is a Swedish word. It's Fika Books, all one word. So you can find me at fikabooks.com or Fika Books Claire on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok.
Fab. And is that where people can subscribe to your email list as well?
Yes. Yeah, they'll find links in all those places.
That was absolutely tremendous. Okay, everybody go and find Claire online, go and subscribe, go and get your Filth on, and let's have some more happy sex. Thank you, Claire.
Great plan. Thanks so much. Lovely to meet you.